Back in 1791, the slaves and free colors in French Saint-Domingue had began multiple rebellions throughout the colony. The rebellion, which would become known as the Haitian Revolution, would last for 13 years. Finally, on May 18, 1803, rebel army leaders would meet in the western province in the city between Saint-Marc and Port-au-Prince and officially unite around selected leader Jean-Jacques Dessalines to form what would be known as the Indigenous Army. The free colored leaders and the rebel slave leaders would unite to finally defeat the French armies and declare their independence on January 1st, 1804. They would name the new country Haiti after the indigenous Taino Arawak word Haiti, which meant land of the mountains. In the declaration document for Haiti, Article 12 states, "No white man, regardless of his nationality, may set foot in this territory as a master or landowner, nor will he ever be able to acquire any property." Article 14 in the declaration states, "Because all distinctions of color amongst children of the same family must necessarily stop, Haitians will from henceforth only be known generically as blacks." But because of this massive victory of a nation of colored people over a nation of whites, the new Haitian government would be placed under an economic trade embargo until 1825. So the year was 1825, and the president was a self-installed leader and military dictator, Jean-Pierre Boyer. See, the French had lost their slaves because those slaves had rose up and overthrew them back in 1801 under Toussaint Louverture. Then the French came back in 1803 under the Leclerc expedition to attempt to re-enslave the rebels, but got their ass whooped again under Jean-Jacques Dessalines. So to avoid another humiliating military expedition, they sent a demand, or rather a request, for compensation in exchange for recognition of their independence, which technically Haiti had already obtained with their blood. So France began formulating an indemnity plan to have Haiti placed in economic bondage to them rather than physical bondage to them. They would rather attempt to squeeze monetary restitution for lost French property. The terms of the deal would be 150 million francs over 5 installments to compensate French planters for their losses. So this is about $21 billion in today's US dollars. This deal is worse than the rent-to-own rim and tire shops, huh? By the way, no one knows where the number amount of 150 francs came from anyway. This is what the French government wanted. In exchange, France would concede that the former inhabitants of the French part of Saint-Domingue would enjoy full and complete independence. Haitian president gave the royal decree to a small commission of advisors, and they informed him that the decree was bullshit and should be rejected. But in a private meeting between President Boyer and the French envoy, President Boyer had hoped that the diplomatic recognition would open Haitian exports to the international markets of the world, and that this would bring in modern technology, expertise, investments, and hopefully any reparations paid out to the French would be made insignificant by the economic boom. France stated that if Haiti did not accept the deal, they would continue to be economically blockaded forever. Boyer's compliant Senate ratified the agreement, and the public was not told about the deal. All President Boyer stated publicly was that the French had finally decided to recognize our independence. This triggered a wave of parties and celebrations. Well, that is until the French newspapers arrived later detailing the terms of the deal. Then the public was outraged that Boyer had agreed to reparation payments to France for the recognition of the independence they had already won. Of course, the Haitian government didn't have 150 million francs or even 30 million francs to make the first installment payment that would be due at the end of 1825. But there was no need to worry. The helpful French emissaries agreed to arrange a loan from French banks to cover the initial installment payment. The terms for the loan was 30 million over 25 years at 6% interest and a whopping 20% service fee. From that moment on, Haiti was crushed under this double debt of indemnity plus interest plus service fees, which equaled for the foreseeable future. The debt accumulated 30% of Haiti's annual budget. Nonetheless, in 1825, Haiti was now on the map as an independent sovereign nation, and all other independent powers would begin sending emissaries to acknowledge them and negotiate trade terms. Well, okay, except for one country. That was the United States. The U.S. would not acknowledge Haiti's independence until President Abraham Lincoln was persuaded to do so during the Civil War in 1862. Why? Because it could serve as a possible destination for his Negro populations to be shipped to after the war. The debt to France would take 122 years to pay off and would finally be settled in 1947, but the country would face civil wars, famine, and multiple natural disasters that would cripple the first black nation in the New World to this day.